Welcome to Curious Nightmares, the channel where your fears and deepest curiosities collide. Prepare for spine-tingling tales and eerie explorations into the supernatural. Subscribe and stay tuned for hair-raising stories.
Chilling true encounter, unexplained horror on my Caribbean cruise. I had always dreamt of a Caribbean cruise, the kind you see in glossy brochures, full of sunsets and smiles. As I boarded the Siren's Whisper, a shiver ran down my spine, inexplicably chilling me under the scorching sun. The first few days were blissful, the kind of serenity you read about in vacation magazines, but it was the third night when things began to unravel. I woke up to whispers outside my cabin, a language I couldn't understand, and a cold breeze that seemed to come from nowhere. I told myself it was just the wind. In the days following my eerie experience with the whispers, the ship's charm began to wane, replaced by a growing unease. I tried to engage in the cheerful activities, but the sense of foreboding clung to me. That's when I first saw her, the enigmatic older woman. Standing at the ship's stern, her antiquated clothing seemed out of place, her gaze unnervingly fixed on me. I brushed it off as mere coincidence, yet her presence felt ominous. Later, as I strolled on the deck, a chill ran down my spine. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, she was there, trailing behind, her eyes a silent, penetrating force. Hastening back to my cabin, her presence felt inescapably close, pushing me to the brink of panic. Sleep was elusive that night. The ship's moans and creaks seemed louder, more sinister. Suddenly, a scream shattered the silence, jolting me awake. It was a woman's scream, abrupt and filled with terror. I flung open my door to an empty, eerily quiet corridor. The following days were marked by strange occurrences. Objects in my cabin moved inexplicably, and faint, haunting melodies echoed at night. One morning I found an old locket on my pillow, bearing the image of a woman strikingly similar to the mysterious passenger. Queries to the crew yielded nothing but evasive responses. The woman, they suggested, was a mere figment of my imagination, but the unsettling event suggested otherwise. As the day progressed, other passengers began whispering about odd experiences, fleeting shadows, an omnipresent sense of being watched. The once peaceful cruise had morphed into a journey fraught with unspoken fears. Avoiding the decks at night, I sought refuge in sleep, only to be plagued by nightmares of endless darkness and the old woman's haunting visage. Each morning I awoke feeling more trapped in this maritime nightmare. The ship, a haven of laughter and light just days before, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. Seeking clarity, I made my way to the captain's quarters. The usually bustling corridors were eerily quiet. I found the captain in his quarters, his face etched with lines of worry that seemed deeper than the ocean we sailed on. He wasn't the unflappable figure I had seen commanding the ship. He looked like a man haunted by ghosts only he could see. "Captain, I need to understand what's happening on this ship," I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper. "There are legends," his gaze distant, "tales of a woman who vanished on this very route decades ago. They say her spirit lingers, trapped in an eternal voyage. I always thought they were just stories, but now..." His voice faltered, and for a moment he seemed to age right before my eyes. "But why? Why is this happening now?" I asked, desperate for some logical explanation. The captain shook his head, his expression darkening. "I don't know, but there's a storm coming, unlike any I've ever seen. It's as if the sea itself is angry, restless. Maybe it's her, the woman from the legends, stirring the depths." The thought of being trapped on a ship with a vengeful spirit sent shivers down my spine. I asked about the old woman I'd seen, the one who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. He sighed, a heavy, resigned sound. "I've seen her too. In the corners of my eyes, in the reflections on the water. She's watching us, waiting for something. I fear what might happen when she finds it." As I left the captain's quarters, the ship creaked ominously, as if echoing his words. The air felt heavier, charged with a foreboding tension. I returned to my cabin, the captain's words echoing in my mind. The ship sailed on, cutting through the dark waters, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were sailing into a nightmare. The laughter and chatter that once filled the ship were now replaced by hushed conversations and anxious glances. The passengers, like me, felt the growing unease and intangible dread permeating the air. That evening, as the sun began its descent, the sky transformed dramatically. Dark, ominous clouds rolled in. The sea tossed with an angry intensity, as if mirroring the turmoil brewing above. In my cabin, the tension was suffocating. The walls seemed to close in, and the familiar creaks of the ship now sounded like desperate moans. My heart raced as the wind howled outside, a symphony of nature's wrath that seemed to resonate with the whispers of the past. As night enveloped the ship, the storm unleashed its full fury. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the roiling waves in ghostly flashes. Thunder boomed, a sound so primal and terrifying it shook the very core of the ship. It felt like the ocean itself was rising up, a monstrous entity awakened from the deep. The whispers returned, louder and more urgent than before, weaving through the storm's cacophony. They seemed to be calling out, beckoning me, pulling at the edges of my sanity. The boundary between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving me in a state of petrified confusion. Then, in a brief lull in the storm, I heard it, a cry, distant yet distinct, a scream of pure terror that echoed through the corridors. I rushed out of my cabin, my mind racing. The dimly lit hallway stretched out, empty and foreboding. The scream had come from somewhere on the ship. As I moved through the trembling ship, the storm's rage intensified. The ship pitched and rolled, a plaything in the hands of the relentless storm. It was as if the storm was alive, a vengeful spirit expressing its fury, a fury that was echoed by the mysterious woman who haunted the ship's passages. The storm raged on, surrounding Siren's whisper in its furious embrace. The ship, once a symbol of leisure and escape, now felt like a vessel adrift in a sea of terror. With the storm's wrath showing no sign of abating, a desperate need for answers propelled me towards the ship's library, a place I hoped would offer some clues to the unnerving events unfolding around us. The library was a sanctuary of sorts, its walls lined with books that held tales of the sea, both factual and fictional. But as I entered, the air felt denser, charged with an unseen energy. I began to search, my fingers tracing the spines of old, dust-covered volumes. The dim light flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on my eyes. Every creak and whisper of the ship seemed amplified, creating an orchestra of eerie sounds that accompanied my frantic search. Then, hidden among the nautical histories and maritime tales, I found it, an old logbook, its leather cover worn and cracked. As I opened it, a chill ran through me. The pages were filled with entries from decades ago detailing a voyage similar to ours, but it was the story of one passenger that caught my attention, a woman who vanished under mysterious circumstances during a storm much like the one we were experiencing. The description of the woman sent a jolt of recognition through me. It matched the mysterious older woman I'd seen on the deck, the one whose presence had been a constant source of dread. The entries spoke of her strange behavior leading up to her disappearance, of whispers in the night and an unsettling aura that surrounded her. As I delved deeper into the logbook, the air around me grew colder, the atmosphere heavier. The storm outside seemed to resonate with the words on the page. Suddenly, the lights flickered more violently, casting the room into near darkness. A gust of wind howled, sending papers flying like frantic birds trying to escape an unseen predator. In that moment, amidst the chaos of the storm and the revelations of the logbook, I felt a presence behind me. Slowly, I turned, my heart pounding in my chest. There, in the shadows, stood the old woman, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She reached out towards me, her fingers inches from my face, and whispered words that chilled me to the bone. But before I could react, she vanished, leaving me alone in the dark, storm-ravaged library. Her words lingered in the air, a haunting message that revealing a truth more terrifying than I could have imagined. Haunted by the ghostly apparition and her cryptic message, I left the library with a heavy heart, the storm's cacophony a fitting backdrop to my turmoil. The ship now felt like a floating tomb, each creak and groan a reminder of the unseen horrors lurking in its shadows. With a newfound sense of dread, I made my way to the captain's dinner, a gathering that, under normal circumstances, would signify celebration and camaraderie. However, under the current sinister circumstances, it felt more like a gathering of souls on the brink of a chilling revelation. The dining hall was dimly lit, the storm outside casting eerie shadows across the tables. The other passengers were quiet, their conversations mere whispers, as if afraid to disturb whatever spirits might be listening. The clinking of cutlery and glasses provided a surreal soundtrack to the evening, each sound amplified in the tense atmosphere. The captain, a figure of authority and reassurance in such troubled times, stood to address us. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on each face as if searching for answers in our expressions. He began to speak, his voice steady but tinged with an uncharacteristic nervousness. But mid-sentence he stopped. His eyes widened in shock, fixating on something or someone behind me. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I slowly turned, expecting to see the ghostly woman or some other apparition. But there was nothing, only the swaying shadows and the anxious faces of the other passengers. When I turned back, the captain was gone. In the blink of an eye, he had vanished into thin air. A collective gasp echoed through the dining hall, followed by a stunned silence. The crew, quick to react, began a frantic search, but it was as if the captain had been swallowed by the ship itself. The atmosphere turned from eerie to outright panic. Whispers turned into cries of fear, the storm's howling winds mirroring our growing despair. The ship felt alive, its creaks and moans like the laughter of an unseen specter reveling in our terror. That night, no one slept. As dawn broke, the storm finally subsided, but the sense of horror remained. In the solitude of my cabin, the weight of the events that had unfolded was overwhelming. The walls seemed to echo with the ghostly remnants of the past, every sound a reminder of the deepening mystery that enveloped the ship. The whispers had ceased, but their absence left an oppressive silence, filled with the unspoken fears of what might come next. The sea outside was calm now, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. I sat by the porthole, staring into the vastness, feeling an unsettling mix of isolation and exposure. The disappearance of the captain, the eerie sightings of the old woman, the whispers and screams, they all swirled in my mind, pieces of a puzzle too complex and horrifying to comprehend. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the past few days replayed in my mind, each more unsettling than the last, leaving me in a state of constant dread. I could feel the ship moving beneath me, a gentle sway that felt like the rocking of a cradle in a dark. The next morning, the sun rose, casting a deceptive glow of normalcy over the ship. But the sense of unease remained, a shadow that the light couldn't dispel. The passengers spoke in hushed tones, their conversations punctuated with glances over shoulders and uneasy pauses. As the day wore on, the ship felt more and more like a ghostly realm. The laughter and joy that had once filled its spaces were now distant memories, replaced by an ambience of suspense and apprehension. In the midst of this, there was a knock on my cabin door. With a racing heart, I approached, half expecting to see the old woman or another phantom from the ship's haunted past. As I cautiously opened the cabin door, a profound silence enveloped me, a stark contrast to the eerie whispers and chilling occurrences of the past days. The corridor was empty, its usual buzz of activity replaced by a haunting stillness. As the cruise neared its end, a sense of surreal calm settled over the vessel. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake a troubled peace. The passengers, once vibrant with excitement, now moved with a quiet introspection, each lost in their thoughts, pondering the enigmatic experiences that had intertwined our fates. Finally, the day of disembarkation arrived. The ship docked, and one by one, we left the siren's whisper, stepping back into the realm of the ordinary. As for me, I lingered on the dock for a moment, taking a final glance at the ship. It was then that I saw them, the captain and the mysterious old woman standing together at the railing. They were ethereal, their forms translucent, gazing out over the new passengers boarding for the next voyage. In that brief, chilling moment, our eyes met. A myriad of emotions passed through their ghostly gazes. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding of the secrets of the siren's whisper. I turned away. A shiver ran down my spine. The image of the captain and the woman lingered in my mind. The ghostly figures, watching over the new passengers as the ship set sail. As I walked away, I couldn't help but wonder, after all the shadows and secrets I'd encountered, would the call of the ocean ever tempt me to embark on another cruise? Or had this trip forever altered my course?